Happy Friday. We have another Mavens of Manufacturing episode, and today is episode 206. And it's pretty interesting. Lindsey and I were just talking about how we both have a situation going on where our kids are home from school. Mine had their last day yesterday, so we might have an interruption here or there, which is totally fine. That's what makes these lives interesting. But today we're going to be talking about going from an engineering technical position right into technical marketing, which I'm really crazy about because that's kind of the pathway that I took. I was never an engineer, though, always a technical writer, never an engineer. But we have Lindsey Sullivan, and she's from
CCS
CS.
America. Yeah.
Thank you.
Creating
I was going to
customer
say
satisfaction, which
I was going to say a different acronym, but we had Emily on your team a couple weeks ago, and I saw her at Automate, and I never got a chance to do your guys' air hockey demo in your booth. I'm disappointed in that because I love air hockey, but Emily's team was great, and she recommended Lindsey, and I'm super excited to have you here, Lindsey. So how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Definitely like juggling the kids and being home and stuff like that, but it's been great. And I'm unbelievably happy Automate is over. Now we're just on to planning the next trade show. So
yeah, what trade show are you going to next?
We're doing Semicon West.
Okay. I think Emily mentioned that, and I've never been there before. So I'm going to have to take a look into that one and see if I can make the next one. It sounds really interesting. So, but Lindsey, can you give us a little bit more background information? Just introduce yourself and tell us what you do at CCS America.
Yeah, so I'm technically the technical marketer manager at CCS America. So that kind of consists of making the content that we use to do our marketing to other businesses to buy our products. And we focus more on doing the technical side of it. But kind of my background was after college, I started doing sales in machine vision for the whole system. And after I realized I wasn't a huge fan of sales, I and my boyfriend at the time, we were going to move to Boston. I was like, I need to do anything but sales, but I like this industry a lot. So I went to CCS America, and I was an application engineer with them for a while. And then eventually I went from application engineer to the manager of application engineers, and then stepped over to technical marketing, the manager of technical marketing.
Well, do you have reasons why you made that switch? Because marketing is a little different than engineering. Like, what was it about that position that attracted to you, and what sort of skill set did you think you could bring to the table to really help elevate CCS?
Yeah, so we're a small company at CCS. So as an engineer, you were wearing many hats. And so I was doing we didn't have a marketing team because Emily was working in Japan at the time. And so any like marketing we had was like me making a flyer in my spare time. So I was kind of doing a lot of it already, although I look back at like some of the flyers I made and I'm like, oh my God, that was so bad. Like I've learned so much since, the beginning. But I was already kind of half doing it just because of the resources that the company had. And then when we moved from Boston to Michigan for my husband's job, we were about an hour and a half from the office that we had in Detroit. And so to do application engineering every, few days, I was driving an hour and a half to the office and back, and it was just getting to be a lot. And so I was having my first child around that time. And so while I was on maternity leave, we kind of worked out that Emily was back. She was doing marketing. She could use some help. I already had some of the marketing experience. I had the technical experience because, we are advertising to other engineers. So we have to know what they want, what they think about, which I had that experience. So it kind of just fit perfectly up. I didn't want to travel an hour and a half anymore. I could work remote from home full time. And I already had some of the experience. Emily was there for the rest of it. So it just fit.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, let's talk about your engineering background and your engineering experience, because one of the things that I find fascinating and disappointing at the same time is on a global scale, women only represent like 16% of engineering globally, which is I think that's crazy to me, because I think it's a really good space for women to enter. It's a very creative space. And I think, when people think engineering, they immediately have like this image of someone with like glasses and a pocket protector and suspenders, and that's not it at all. So what originally pulled you toward engineering, and was there a moment in school or growing up that made you say, yes, this is the space that I want to be in?
Yeah, my dad always said, you're going to be an engineer when you grow up, because I thought I was good at math. Growing from third grade on, I was in the advanced math courses, and he was just like, it's a good career. This is what you're going to do. My sister as well. She's also an industrial engineer. And so I was always like, okay, I guess I'll do that. And I've never really thought to explore anything else until I got to college and I had my first semester of mechanical engineering. And I was like, well, I actually hate this. And like, it was fine, but I was just like, this is definitely, I like it, but it's not exactly what I want. So I took a lot of courses that I thought would interest me, like some business ones. I took some marketing ones, like what do I want? Declared my major a few times. And finally at my junior year, I was going in with an undeclared major. And I was just kind of like, I just need to find something that will get me out of here in the shortest amount of time. So I'm looking through the undergrad, major options. And what wasn't there before, but was there this time, was industrial engineering. And when I looked at the curriculum for this major, I was on track for my junior year because of all the marketing, the business, everything like that I took to find what I was interested in was what this curriculum was. And so that was a moment where I was like, okay, I know I liked industrial and I liked engineering, didn't want to be as technical as mechanical. I liked more of the process, and industrial engineering was like, this is what I got to do. So I called up my advisor and I was like, can I do this? Is it, you're just starting, this is the first year that you guys are offering it. Can I do it? And she looked into it and was like, you'll have to take a few courses as the grad level, because they weren't offering the undergrad level because there was no one there to take it except for me. So I had to swap out a few of them as the grad level courses. And she was like, there's a simulation class that starts in 45 minutes, sign up and go. I was like, okay. So I signed up for this grad level simulation course and showed up, and I was an industrial engineer after that.
What was involved in the simulation class? What did you learn there?
That was we learned a lot about probability and statistics, and then using Arena to, recreate the project we had at the end of the year was deciding what the best, when you're in line at Starbucks, what the best way to have the employees is, 2 people checking out, 2 people making drinks, 3 people checking out, 1 person making drinks. So we did a time study. We, did the probability of all these things coming together. And then we created it in this program called Arena that we decided it was 2 people doing checkout, 2 people making drinks, and 1 person kind of floating, doing what needed to be done. And that would get people through at the fastest amount of time. It's cool.
That's really interesting. Yeah. See, and I think we do a terrible job at kind of highlighting some of these things that are included in these courses. I would have never known that there was a simulation course for anything. And I think another big challenge that we have is there's so many different types of engineering. There's mechanical, there's civil, there's chemical, and now there's industrial. So what sort of advice would you give to anyone who's interested in engineering? What sort of kind of research should they do to know which one is the place they want to be? Because I just feel like there's so many different kinds, and every engineer that I've met started in one area but didn't end up in that area. They ended up somewhere else. So was there specific research you were doing to figure that out? Or
I mean, don't listen to me. I switched my major 8 times. Don't do what I did. I would say you just got to try it. It's not too bad, especially if you're in college, which you have to be an engineer, but just take a course on a lot of different things. They have introductory mechanical engineering 101 kind of thing. They've got a lot of those intro courses that you can kind of tune into that I would try out in the beginning. And then talking to people, reaching out to people on LinkedIn or something other. My husband's a chemical engineer. He's his PhD in chemical engineering, and he'll have people reach out to him and talk about hey, I want to do this. Do you like it? Or, you work for this company. What are they like? So you could even people are happy to help, get an idea of what their day-to-day task is. What do they learn in college? That kind of stuff would be useful as well. I didn't do that, but I wish I had. It would have saved me an extra year.
You're not the only one who switched majors multiple times or didn't know what the heck you wanted to do the rest of your life junior year. I was one of those people as well until technical writing accidentally fell in my lap and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. One of the things that you did, and interesting fact, I started my college career at University of Minnesota. So
You did?
yeah, I was a former Gopher, and then I switched over to Milwaukee in Wisconsin when
Oh.
I got pregnant with my daughter. But yeah, they also have a good engineering program in Milwaukee. But one of the things you did was also minor in math. And how has that shaped how you approach engineering problems or strategies today? Because I'm always like, are people really using this type of math? Because when I was going, I'm not good at math at all. Like I can do your basic math, but I still use my fingers for addition and subtracting. And then all the formulas and stuff. I'm always curious if people are actually using that in their careers. So how has minoring in math really helped your engineering career pathway?
Yeah, I would definitely I'm not using my, like Calc 4 is not anymore in here at all. I will say my husband when he was doing his technical stuff, he would be doing like pages and pages of calculations for like hours. I was like, all right, I'm not doing that kind of homework anymore. But for me, it was really good at being able to just kind of see patterns in things because you're kind of trained to see how does this fit the formula every time. Every problem is different, but it's the same formula. And so I really am good now. I've come to realize at seeing things that all kind of feel separate, but seeing how they relate together, making them a formula, and then I can kind of teach that concept easier because I can give a full train of thought of it's just like this and this and this and this. And if you follow that, you can solve your application.
That's cool.
Utilizing it in that regard, which has been fun.
So you can like apply it to your marketing stuff that you're doing then.
Yeah, really? Like one of our webinars, this is exactly what happened was we were making a webinar about, it was a case study for solving pill inspections. And like in my talk with Emily, I was like telling her like, these are just the steps that you take when you solve applications. And I'd never seen them laid out that way. And she was like, this feels like people should know. And I was like, yes, let's make a webinar. So we took this case study and essentially made this like 5-step way of solving applications that people don't really necessarily talk about. There's like, here's the physics of solving light, but really that's just one part of solving the application. There's the before of getting the application information, the setup, the samples, then the solving, and then, the report and all that jazz. So made that whole formula, a whole 5-step process of a system that never really had that before.
That's really cool. Maybe I need to start upping my skill set and more math stuff. But you spent several years working directly with machine vision applications across industries. You also spent some time at Keyence, which is interesting because my good friend Nikki Gonzalez also worked there as an applications sales engineer, I think. So she's more on the sales side and business development. And I agree with you. I don't like sales one bit. It just ugh. And nothing against people who are great at sales. It just the term for me makes me cringe a little bit. I don't know why. There's some really good people out there that do really well in sales. I wish I had that skill set. I just don't think I do. But what were some of the coolest or most bizarre challenges you had to solve in that space?
Yeah, that's a good question. You were always what I like. So at Keyence, their expectations were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You were going to, different companies, and then we would get tours of their facility. So, like, this is really hard because I had so many tours of really like looking at how roofing shingles are made. I was at like the Genio turkey factory, and so like, and then I'd be at like a plastic injection molding or be at like a Veda, and so it was all just this very different. But every single day was like, do you remember that TV show How It's Made? It was on the Food Network, and that was probably another thing that made me like realize I loved industrial engineering because that was like my favorite show when I was younger because you just see how they made like Cheetos. But every really cool day it was like my little personal How It's Made. I got like a little tour. So just seeing the variety was really fun. But one kind of maybe a different way to answer the question, but it's still funny, is some of the best things were the samples that you would get. So it wasn't necessarily interesting or cool, but like sometimes you'd do like a, inspection of beer cans and you would have to take home some beer cans and then you'd get them. But like, I went to one of our machine builders one time and they were building a machine for putting labels on pickle jars. and they had to test their machine on full jars of pickles. So they had a whole pallet of pickles. And I was there just to like, set up a few things. And as I was leaving, they were like, well, you're taking pickles with you. And I was like, I don't need pickles. Thank you. And we compromised, and I took a lot of pickles with me. And I took like 4 of the giant, like Costco sized jars of pickles, and 3 of those. And then I had 4 of like the ones that were like big grocery sized things of pickles. And then coincidentally, that same week, I went to the Kraft factory and I was inspecting their like pounds of American cheese. And I needed to test like good and bad of their like packaging. So we just took like ready to sell packages, and they're like, just tear it open when you're ready and do some testing to see if we can test if it's like folded properly. So I had like 8 jars of pickles, 7 jars of pickles, and like 4 pounds of cheese at my house that I could just, eat when I was done testing. And so for like a whole month, I was just like, do you guys want some pickles? Can I just do some cheese?
I would have just threw like a big cookout or something and made hamburgers and just took all the extra.
I lived in an apartment. We didn't have a grill, but it was just fun. So you would get like really cool samples, lotion samples from Aveda and stuff like that. So it was just kind of fun to see it all.
That's really cool. I think that's another interesting like aspect of this sector where we don't see a lot of like we don't see how things get tested or anything like that. And I did a podcast with a friend, and I thought it was interesting that one of the old ways to test airplane windows was to fire chickens at them, like frozen chickens. And we were like looking this up because I was like, I don't know if that's true though or not, because that just seems ridiculous. And how would that engineering meeting go? Like, okay, what are we going to fire at this window to test its durability and its strength? And they actually had to switch it to 3D printed like clay chickens because what is that food or animal, PETA or something got involved. It was like, you cannot fire chicken at like live chickens or frozen chickens at the window. That's just not cool. So then they had to like switch to a 3D printed thing. So we're like laughing in this podcast because we're just like, that's a great engineering perspective. Like, what are some of the craziest things that they have to do to test things that we make? And I think that would be a great show to do. One of the things I like to highlight in the show, and as I mentioned earlier, women only represent like 13 to 16% globally of engineering. So was there any moment in your career pathway, whether you were going through college or even working now, that you've asked yourself if this was a place for you to be? Like, were you ever like the only woman in something, or felt out of place if there was more men in a space that you were working at?
So when I was at Keyence, we were in the machine vision industry or machine vision division, because Keyence sells like a bunch of different kinds of products, and then they have their salespeople focus on just one. So I wasn't selling everything Keyence had. I was just selling their cameras. And at the time, I don't think it's this way anymore, but at the time there was 250, 300 people in that division across the country. And there was 2 girls, me and Ashley, and she was out of Colorado. And so every year we'd have like the whole company would get together in Chicago. We'd split off by division. They'd go through our numbers, all that jazz. And it was just the 2 of us in the room. And like one time she had gone to the bathroom and I just looked around at myself with like 300 men. And I was just like, but there was no line for the bathroom. And that was really nice.
That's awesome.
And it's funny. That's like, I definitely have been in spaces where like I was one of 2 or the only one. And I didn't really feel, it's not like anyone was like, go home, girl, like they were all nice. And, it didn't really feel like nobody wanted me there. I actually won Rookie of the Year that year, which was really cool.
That's awesome.
Out of all the guys. Yeah. But there is just in meetings that you have with people, like there's always some person who thinks that they know more than you, or they just kind of don't trust your opinion right off the bat. And they have their, well, I want to check it, or, can somebody else confirm it in a way? And you kind of just, fine, you do you. I'm confident with what I know the answer. The answer is this. If you want to waste time having somebody else tell you the answer, waste the time. It's not really my problem.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of that, not a lot. But every once in a while you come across it.
Those moments are always extra fun when they realize that you were right all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I just wrote an article recently too about 2 instances that I had. And I was actually on a Zoom call and I got asked to define a copy editor. And I'm like, what? And they were like, what is a copy editor? And I'm like, I'm a technical writer. Like, are we serious? And my friend that was on the call with me just kind of looked and was like, are you serious? Like, what's going on here? So it was kind of a fun experience because I thought the person was joking and they were dead serious. They were just like, I need you to define this. I'm trying to find it. And then I was just like, okay, I'm not working with this person ever in my life. But so let's talk about switching from engineering to technical marketing, because I think this is fascinating because for a while, traditionally, marketing and engineering have always been siloed. They've never work together, but now you're seeing more companies actually blending their departments together because you need that whole story, right? So in your role, what are some skills from your engineering background that you're actually bringing to the marketing side? Like, how is it making your communication from your company better because you're blending those skill sets together?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Emily and I joke around a lot that like I couldn't do this job without her and she couldn't do this job without me.
She said that in her interview, I think.
Yeah, like we definitely need both because she's the strong marketing, she's great at the strategy, and like here we need to send this newsletter at this time and create this touch point, and I'm like, let me just tell everybody everything I know about technical stuff. And it's when you're doing marketing, a lot of it is like finding the pain points that your customers have, coming up with the solution in your product, and then advertising like, you have this problem, we have this solution, call us, right? And so Emily a lot of times knows like this is the process that we do, but she's not 100% sure what the pain point of the engineer is. And I, as somebody who worked with engineers, half my job was solving their pain points of like, they always struggle with this type of problem. So I come in and I'm like, ooh, this is actually like a really, if we can phrase it like this, it'll resonate with the engineers because this is what they want to see. So I can kind of get a better idea of what the engineers value, what kind of solutions do they want. And then together we decide how to, target that to the people that we're trying to target to. So it kind of is just more of a different perspective than, necessarily coming in and being like, Emily, here's the principles of lighting. She doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily care about that as marketing, but what part of the principles of lighting or what part of the solutions do we have do these engineers care about?
So when you're creating your webinars and trainings, because you guys are doing a lot of that where you meant, and we'll get more into the webinars later, but you guys produce a lot of in-person and virtual trainings and webinars, educating people about, lighting technology. And it's not something we talk about a lot unless you're within that niche. So what's that process for both you and Emily to find that healthy balance where you're sharing the technical information, but you're also educating people who might not be engineers or familiar with lighting tech to begin with? Like, what's that process you guys have?
Yeah, that's a really funny question because Emily and I talk about this a lot. We joke around with it because I will make a presentation and I'm like, it's perfect. Emily will have 0 notes. I did incredible. And I'll send it back to her and she'll be like, we're going to talk. And she has this unique perspective of like, she always phrases it like, no experienced engineer here, but like, why would this be like this? And like, when you say this, like, what does that mean? So she really encourages me to take just the basic information and like take it a step further and, like phrase it in a way like, oh yeah, I could, if I put it like this, I can kind of tell a story. So honestly, like a lot of it is just presenting it to somebody who's not in the field and being like, does this make sense? Like, what is confusing about what I said? What would make it click a little bit better? So having her and I work together before, but, to kind of toot my own horn, I am, like I said before, very good at seeing the patterns and making it more formulaic. And so I really tried to start from the basics and kind of grow the information more like a story that you kind of are adding on slowly but surely. So by the end of it, everyone was kind of able to follow the steps that you said so they can kind of get the whole concept. So there's a little bit of both. There's definitely couldn't do without Emily. She does so much in terms of making me take the next step. But I feel like I've also gotten good at creating the content and sharing it as more of a story to get everyone can understand from A to Z. We're not starting at G or F or something like that.
So in terms of machine vision lighting, because again, like I know about it because I've gone to Automate and I've seen companies that are doing it. I visited your guys' booth and, you know, I think it does get overlooked. So what is CCS doing differently that others might not be hitting the mark when trying to explain machine vision lighting and why it's so important? Like, what is your guys' unique value proposition on it?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of people kind of, they say like the four cornerstones of vision are like, you know, the principles, contrast, and then there's like two other ones where, in my mind, and like CCS's mind, is contrast isn't necessarily a cornerstone of vision. Contrast is the goal of vision. So instead of like thinking of it as like one of the pillars, it's more the end result, where we're using the lighting principles, we're using the optics, we're using everything to create the contrast, because the contrast is what we want to make the solving of the writing the program and solving the application easier. So instead of it being part of the solution, I consider it more as the answer, which I think is interesting. And when I give our presentations and our trainings, I don't really mention contrast at all, except for how this light will create contrast in this type of application.
That's interesting. So when people are looking for a lighting solution for their system, are there mistakes that you are seeing common among those choices? Like what should they consider when choosing a lighting system? Maybe that's a better way to ask it.
Yeah. So there's a whole common pitfalls webinar where I give a whole 40 minutes of like what to do and what not to do and why you shouldn't do it. So check that out on YouTube if you want a little bit more into this. But a lot of it comes down to testing and what you're testing. So not testing at all is the biggest problem. People will just be like, oh yeah, I've done this in the past. We'll just buy that light. And then like inevitably it, you know, sometimes it works, it's great, but like sometimes it just doesn't. And now we're like trying to add filters on the cameras to make it robust, and a different light would have just solved the problem and saved time. So not testing is a bit like a downfall, or like not testing all of the defects. A lot of times people will be like, oh, we're solving this, but like we need to see short flash, foreign material, and scratches. Here are some scratches and foreign material, but let me know. I can't guarantee I can see the short and flash if I don't have it to test on. So, you know, people sending it to us are doing that, but in their own lab, like test everything. It's also interesting too, is a lot of times people who really don't have the full experience of machine vision, there's a lot of like guidelines of, okay, like low angle light solves scratches. So when people have scratches, they go straight to a low angle light. But if that doesn't work, they don't always know where to go next. And then at that point, it's just trial and error until they find the solution, and then they move on. And there's not a lot of, you know, thought after that of why did this work? What was it about this application that, you know, made it work when the low angle light that was supposed to work didn't work? And so, you know, by having the physics of the light, knowing what you're doing, I'm not necessarily thinking about the application and what solves the application. I'm thinking about how is my light reflecting off my sample, and what kind of light am I capturing with my camera? Is it the direct light? Is it the scattered light? What do I want, you know, what do I want to see? What do I not want to see? So instead of application and answer, it's physics of light. What light am I capturing? What light am I not capturing? If that makes sense.
That's interesting. I'm taking notes so that I can research some of this later, and then I need to watch a couple of your guys' webinars. Are there industries you're working with now where lighting innovation is moving faster or in any unexpected directions? Like what sort of like new things are coming out that you're interested in or getting excited about?
Yeah, AI is really going to be, it's what everyone's saying, but it's going to change the game for machine vision. It's not going to get rid of lighting altogether. For a while, people were like, we're not going to need you. And you will, because a light can hide a defect just as much as it can enhance a defect. And if you're hiding a defect with the wrong light, there's nothing AI can do to bring it out. And so, or you can just get the right light, and then your AI program can just be that much more repeatable because it's going to be more consistent every time. So we're not going away, but I think it's going to be able to make it where it doesn't have to be like as perfect as it does right now. And like, because right now, if you can see a defect with your eyes, that doesn't necessarily translate to you can see, like the camera can see it and make the same judgment. Because we've got, our brains are saying like, oh, there's discoloration on this apple. That's a bruise. That's normal discoloration. But like a camera system sees like there's discoloration here and there's discoloration there. That's all I got. So it'll flag discoloration as a bruise or flag a bruise as just typical discoloration if it's not perfect. And so AI is going to be able to come in and be like, the brains essentially like that we can think and be like, this one's discoloration and this one's not. So it's going to open up applications like that. I think that'll be really great, where we typically wouldn't have been able to solve it reliably enough right now. I think in a few years we'll be able to.
I just don't feel like you're going to completely get rid of vision and lighting, though. I just feel like there's always going to be a need for it. Even if AI gets even better, there's still going to be a need. Like they say the same thing with writing, like, oh, we're not going to need writing anymore because AI is going to take it completely over. And it's like, well, you still need human interaction. Like you still need that human soul. And I just don't see AI ever becoming completely human, you know, like,
yeah, well, it's gonna be like with, you know, you'll have the camera and the light the same way you do now, but right now, like you have your camera and you take your picture and you put tools on, like a blob tool that says, if you see a big black blob and your blob is this big, then it's bad. If it's this big, then it's good. But what AI is gonna do is just look at the picture, and every time it sees blobs, you say this is good, this is bad. It's gonna kind of make that judgment for us, where we don't have to necessarily perfect a tool. AI is going to perfect itself, but it's just the tool in the application. It's not, replacing anything. It's just improving the software that we can do. Yeah.
It's so interesting. So we already talked about your experience as being a woman in the space, and I'm happy to hear that you've had a more positive experience. I have met some other engineers where their experiences haven't been, and I've met women who have completely left the sector altogether because they just didn't have great experiences. So I do want to get into like, what advice do you have for women specifically who would want to stay in engineering, especially if it feels like a space that wasn't built for them? Because I know there are some women who come from, smaller communities or communities that are just more male dominated than others, and they're questioning whether they belong or whether they have, the skill set to advance. What sort of advice would you give to them on why to stay in this space?
Yeah, I would say, you are there because you earned the seat. It's not a favor. Nobody just gave it to you because they were walking down the street. Like, you are where you are because you earned it, you learned it. And being a woman did not inhibit you from learning anything other than being a man would, right? Like, we all learned the same information. So man or woman, it really shouldn't matter. I understand it does, and there's prejudice and that's there, but just always remember, like, I deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. And so as long as you're doing the work and you enjoy it, put your energy on yourself. Just, if you want to have your own prejudices, that's kind of somebody else's problem. But
yeah,
if you feel like you want to be in this space still, you like doing the engineering, you like doing the problem solving, and you've done the work to get good at it, that's what's important, more than feeling like the space was built for you or not. And eventually it will, right? Like, I'm sure a long time ago there weren't women. It was probably 8 to 9%. Now it's 16. Like, eventually we're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit.
I feel like it's important too for like mentorships and being part of certain organizations or communities that you can get that sense of camaraderie, because it does help when you have conversations about experience. So like, I always immediately gravitate towards single moms because I'm a single mom, or even moms in general, because I just love bragging about my kids. And I attended an event called, it was from Women in Manufacturing event, the Men as Allies event. And a guy actually was like, nobody asked me about my kids. And I'm like, I'm going to ask about your kids. Do you have pictures? Like it. So it was just kind of interesting to see like where there's awkwardness and how people communicate with one another when there's not a sense of similarity. Like if you just assume that you're not going to have something in common with someone based off of what they look like or how they identify, it makes it awkward. So you can't just have assumptions. You should, step outside of your comfort zone and ask questions. So it was really interesting. And I do like hearing about, those organizations and mentors. So looking back in your career, is there anyone in particular like who helped you throughout your career to advance to where you're at today?
Yeah. So there's kind of like in line with mentorship. This is SWE, Society of Women Engineers. Got involved with them a little bit in college. They have like events that you can attend and, stuff like that. They have speakers, and it's just female engineers all going to one place and talking and sharing their experiences and stuff like that. So if you're ever feeling discouraged, you can always reach out to someone in SWE and they'll happily talk to you. But actually, the biggest person who kind of helped me keep going when I was getting frustrated was my mom. Because, and this sounds super cheesy, but she did computer programming back when it was like punch cards, and that's how you did your programming. And so she has been in the computer science world her whole life, and she's gone up the ladder and of stuff like that. She's retired now, but she got pretty close to the top when all was said and done. And so anytime I would come to her like, oh, this person thought I didn't know what the word stationary meant, and she would just laugh and like, yeah, that was fun. And she would just laugh and like tell me a story that was like worse. I'm like, okay, so like we've come a long way. But there was one time where I was venting to her because somebody sent kind of a snarky email, and he was like, guys, it is simple, and had this like long rant. And I was like, how dare he? And my mom just started laughing, and she goes, well, he started the email with guys, and you're not a guy, so I don't think he was talking to you. And I was just like, oh, okay.
So just ignore.
Yeah. So like there's a lot of just kind of stuff like that where she just was helpful, not necessarily career wise in terms of like here's how to get your next promotion. I mean, there was that too, but it was more just like the mental relief of like if something frustrating happened, I could just go to her and she'd be like, yeah, been there. That was annoying. Yeah. Thank you. It was.
I think that validation is important sometimes too. We started a group during COVID. It was a bunch of women in engineering and manufacturing. And it was just interesting to see how many people are like, has anyone experienced this before? Or am I just crazy? And they're like, nope, that's happened. And that it does. It gives you that sense of like, okay, I'm not a loony. Like it happens, and it's okay to be frustrated about it. Now that I've vented that frustration, I can go do my job professionally. So it's been interesting. I'm going to mess up your name, and I'm so sorry. I think it's Rocio. Is that correct? If not, I'm so sorry. I apologize. But more women need to feel focused on validating their worth, not the imposter syndrome. I actually don't like that term imposter syndrome because it makes it sound like it's a disease or something, and it's not a disease. So I totally agree with you. And I really love your profile pic and how you connect your love of sewing with what you do. I think she has a really amazing profile. I am horrible at sewing, just an FYI. I tried to do that at a younger age, and I just could not get the sewing machine to like me. So I admire people that can do that kind of stuff. What are you most excited about in the work you're doing now? Like what's on your radar, and what are you guys working on? Or is there anything that you can tell us what you guys are like? Can you give us a teaser?
Yeah. So, we did a lot of webinars in the past, and we are still kind of working on taking that content, but taking it a step further and doing more in-person trainings and stuff like that, and doing hands-on portions. Because how many times do you listen to a presentation and you're like, that was great, and then like it comes time to apply it later and you're like, I don't like that, did not stick as much as I thought it stuck. It seemed so straightforward at the time, and now it's not. So now we're kind of creating these in-person trainings where we do the lighting principles, but after that there's a hands-on portion where we have 6 applications and a table of lights, and you're just solving 6 applications while there's other engineers there around to help. And like we can talk through, here's what I picked. Okay, why did you pick it? Why isn't it working? What is the light doing? Why is it or like, they'll kind of have half of it where it's off to the side, but they have the wrong light. And I'm like, okay, so you're capturing the direct light, but is there a better light that would give you better direct light to capture? And then they can be like, oh yeah, I need this ring light instead of the bar light type of thing to give it more uniform. So I'm excited to get our, we call them our AE events, or no, not our AE events, what they were called, our technical roundtables, getting those kind of off and running and making them like a well-oiled machine.
That's cool. Are
yeah.
you just doing it with the companies that you work with, or is this something that you have available for like schools?
We haven't talked about doing it with schools, but anyone can come. So, we'll have because of the applications, we have about 18 people can be in each one, maybe 20, give or take, just so that a hands-on portion is still valuable. But anyone can sign up, anyone can attend wherever. The next one's coming up in Keene, New Hampshire.
That's really cool. So is there a cost then to register?
No,
Not at all.
No,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get that information from you guys so that I can include it in the post that I create after our conversation. So hopefully we can generate some more registrants for you. But I think I know one of the biggest problems that I've been hearing through some of my conversations is that, people that go either the 4-year route of school or even like through an apprentice, like even some of the community colleges, they're not getting that real life experience of what's actually happening on in the industry. So then when they do get a job, there's like an onboarding process or training that takes a little bit longer because they're not familiar with some of the things that are going on in industry. So I think the training that you're offering really bridges that gap that some of these companies are talking about. So that's really cool. So we'll be giving that information out in the follow-up article that I do after this conversation. Well, Lindsey, this has been really great. I enjoy talking to you, and I think it's cool that CCS is bridging that gap between engineers and marketers, and you're able to create better educational content because of it. If anybody has any questions, especially about your training programs, where can they connect with you, and what is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is going to be the best one. I'm always on LinkedIn and I try and post technical content. I'm working on posting, like more of my thoughts and stuff, but it's kind of hard to get over my aversion of like sharing opinions publicly. But yeah, I'll be on LinkedIn. Lindsey Sullivan at work at CCS America. Any questions, feel free.
Awesome. And if there's one thing you're hoping people take away from this conversation, what would it be?
Yeah. So if you were thinking about doing engineering and you kind of feel like you're not going to fit in, we kind of touched on this a little bit of, I would say, what does fit in mean? Fit in regards to what? A stereotype of some kind? What are we fitting into? In reality, every engineering team is a patchwork of different brains. And so really engineering is just puzzle solving in the real world. And like if you like untangling these problems and building better versions of things, then you already belong in the industry. You're already there. And we don't need carbon copies of the same resume, the same people, the same thought processes. Like it needs fresh angles. It needs to have different lived experiences. Someone has to come in with things we haven't tried yet. So don't really worry about squeezing into this pre-cut mold. Come in with your own angles and then, be your own edges. The teams that wins are the ones that have a lot of different perspectives. So you are just one of the perspectives. You're not going to be exactly like somebody else. You're going to be you, and it's going to be better than if you were a second version of the same person, because then you don't have anything different to add.
I think that's great advice because we get into this cycle of groupthink sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I love bringing kids into this space and seeing their reactions when they're seeing how things are made, because they just haven't been, I don't want to say manipulated because that sounds like a really bad way of putting it, but they don't have filters on. Like they're coming in with fresh perspectives and they're not afraid to ask questions, and they haven't been trained to see things a certain way, if that makes sense. Like they're coming in brand new and they want to know why all the time. So I think it's great to bring kids into that's why I like FIRST so much, because the kids just come in and they say whatever's on their mind with no filter, and they have some of the best ideas. So I think that's a great piece of advice. So Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for tuning in. For anyone that was tuning in and watching, thank you. I really appreciate it. There's going to be an article coming out next week, just kind of highlighting some of the main points that Lindsey and I covered. But make sure to visit CCS's website. Make sure to check out their webinars. And if you have any questions about their in-person trainings, be sure to contact Lindsey or even Emily. Emily was on a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking more on the marketing side of things, but she was also talking about the importance of combining your engineering teams and your marketing teams together so that you can get that full story of a company. So if you're having trouble with your brand storytelling, stay tuned. I do have a message from one of our sponsors, Z Inc Solutions. They can help with some of your brand strategies. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great, wonderful, and safe weekend and enjoy your summer. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Inc Solutions. Z Inc Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zincSolutions.com. That's z-incsolutions.com.